delegates attending this conference. Good evening to one and all. We are starting with the plenary session 3. Plenary session 3 involves the Dr. Vikram Sarabhai Memorial Lecture. As the first lecture series will be the Dr. Vikram Sarabhai Memorial Lecture, which will be moderated by Secretary ISRS, Dr. Samish Sharan. I request sir to take the stage.
I welcome you all to one of the most important events of Indian Society of Remote Sensing, that is Dr. Vikram Sarabhai Memorial Lecture. Just to give you a background, in fact, as a tribute to Dr. Vikram Ambalal Sarabhai, the Indian Society of Remote Sensing initiated this lecture series. In fact, this was started way back in 1992, where very high eminent speakers have delivered during this particular series. So to name a few, Professor U.R. Rao, Dr. M.G.K. Menon, as well as P.R.P. Sharoti. Now this year, as everybody knows, that the entire country is celebrating Dr. Vikram Sarabhai centenary. And in fact, this year we have Professor Karnik, who will be delivering very important talk. And to begin with, may I request President ISRS to kindly, in fact, tell our audience about the biodata of our respected speaker.
Thank you, Samir. It's my immense privilege to introduce Professor Kiran Karnik, Padma Shri. In fact, this lecture we have specifically arranged to commemorate Vikram Sarabhai's birth centenary under aegis of ISRS, and no better person other than Kiran Karnik can befit this occasion. And one of the aim for this lecture was to just to demonstrate, if you want to do different things, you need a different class of people. And you know that Kiran Karnik sir is not a normal space scientist. You know, he's a BSc in physics with an MBA, and with no slight of imagination you can think that he fits the space scientists there. But he did that one of the most extraordinary things. He brought space science from the high pedestal to ground. That is what he did by being the backbone of the SITE program. It's the first time, I think, in the history of space science that it was demonstrated, if you want to solve the smallest of problems, like education, which is so widespread, you need a high technology. And what is the problem of education? You can have money, you can build big schools, colleges and all. But what you cannot get by money is the teachers. And the teachers and students' proximity is the crux of education. It can be spread. One teacher, instead of teaching 40, 60, 100 students, can teach thousands of students simultaneously at different places if you use the space technology. And this is exactly Kiran sir has done. In fact, he was the backbone of this program, and he brought the first time a concept of infotainment. You just imagine, you know, a person who has to manage a high technology along with coming alive. And he was also the director of development of educational communication unit, which is situated in Space Application Center. And as he is, you know, he has done many different things. He left ISRO. We lost one of the famed personality, and he has joined Discovery. You know, today the Discovery Channel existence, an animal planet, it goes to him. He was the first CEO discover India. And then he left to become NASCOM chief. You know, it's just unbelievable things. You know, a person can change his career. And today, the software industry, the way it established, the regulations that established, the rules of the game is established, it's all happened on Kiran Karni's time. And he has been in many national committees, including Scientific Advisory Council to Prime Minister and National Innovation Council. But today, I think he gets pleasure in chairing the boards of Indraprastha Institute of Information Technology, Delhi, Oxfam, India, and Helpus India. In fact, his whole gamut of life brings out that humanism is the basis of science. And today there can never be a better speaker than Kiran Karni sir. And sir, you are kindly welcome.
Good evening, and let me first say that it's an extraordinary pleasure and privilege to be here, both the Indian Society for Remote Sensing and the Indian Society for Geomatics. I'm very thankful for the very generous and kind introduction by my dear friend Tapan. All of you know him, even the younger people know of him, and you know that he always tells the truth. So please believe him, I'm a good guy. Right, thank you very much. That was a very generous introduction. Told you a little bit about my career and what I've done. This evening I want to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about Vikram Sarabhai himself, talking of his vision for technology and what it did. And with your indulgence, I'll bring in some personal anecdotes because I think nothing can personalize and bring out the character of both Vikram Sarabhai and therefore of ISRO than to narrate how a person like me, first association with ISRO has been so long that even today, when I hear, as I did the last talk, I get goosebumps because I feel very proud. Those 25 years, no, more than that since I left ISRO, I yet think I'm part of the family. And so when I hear good things and all the achievements, I feel indeed very proud. So all my colleagues from ISRO and those associated, my personal thanks because you make me feel proud and happy and really good to be here. But I want to start not with ISRO, but with atomic energy. And I'll tell you why. When I first joined atomic energy, and I'll come to that in a moment, why and how I landed up there, I was working directly with Vikram Sarabhai. And the first assignment he gave me is something you'll never believe. I'd done some physics from Bombay, and I'd done an MBA, which of course makes you, think you know everything. Actually, you know nothing, but you think you know everything. So he called me and said, look, I've got something which needs to be done. It's very interesting. And I want you to look at it. And I thought this may be something to do with atomic energy. I said, I better go back and brush up on my physics, pull out all our textbooks and begin to understand. Yes, it required a little bit of that. But you know what the assignment was? It had to do with potatoes and onions. And you know what it was, and this tells you the character of the person more than the assignment itself. Atomic energy in those days meant a lot of things. It meant power, it meant possibly nuclear bombs, it meant a lot of things. It also meant radiation. And there were concerns around the world about radiation and what it does and what you do with spent fuel and how do you make sure it doesn't radiate. And here was this man thinking about how to use it positively. And why he wanted me to work on potatoes and onions was because all the data that had been presented to him by various people showed that a lot of potatoes and onions in our country, like many other things, go waste because they don't last long. They don't last because they start sprouting. If you kept potatoes in your kitchen for a while, you know what I mean. And so, it was found that radiation can inhibit sprouting. And he wanted me to work first with the scientists to see that can we safely and securely, without affecting any of the negative parts of human consumption of potatoes and onions, prevent the sprouting by radiation. And then more importantly, what would be the economics of this for farmers? How would farmers benefit? How could they use it? What can we do? That was my first assignment. And I tell you this because it tells you about his thinking about how to use technology for something concrete, as Tapan just said, as down to earth, irradiation, controlled radiation of these things, down to earth to the farms of India, because he realized that farmers were having serious problems and they were having serious losses. That was my first understanding of his thinking of how to use technology and what it should be there. Let me go back a little bit more, a little more personal anecdote, and then I'll move on forward quickly. The reason I ended up there was, I don't know how many of you have dealt with any graduates from any of the IIMs, particularly the so-called better known ones. I would pride myself that I'm the best Ahmedabad, but you know, they all come with a chip on their shoulder. They think they're God's gift to mankind, and I was one of those when I graduated. And they're very good at egos. So they think that, you know, any job is a bit low from them, but they might take it. And everybody then was looking for all these nice, cushy, well-paid jobs like most people do. Nothing wrong with that, that's what people are looking for. And a few of us, very few, I think just 3-4 of us, decided to go for this little interview which was announced saying that Atomic Energy wanted to recruit a few people. This is core Atomic Energy, and you will be a government employee and would pay you probably a third or a fourth of what you could get in one of the multinationals which are offering jobs. And 3-4 of us went there, I think more out of curiosity than anything else. And frankly, I'll tell you why I went. I'd heard that Dr. Vikram Sarabhai himself would come and interview people, if there were not too many of them. And since there were, I think, 3-4, maybe half a dozen, he would come himself. So I said, here's a chance to meet this. You know, even then he was a well-known person, even certainly in Ahmedabad, but around the world. He had taken over as chairman of Atomic Energy Commission some time back. And I said, here's a chance to meet this person face to face and spend some time with him. Why lose the opportunity? Obviously, you know, lots of other jobs which are better paid and so on. And I went to meet him, and I can tell you the first 10 minutes, this bloated ego, this chip on my shoulder, this wanting to earn a huge income was all gone. He had very successfully, I would say in marketing terms, sold, but really convinced me of the concept of what he was trying to do, which was to bring radical change by bringing management practices into government, not in the space program, not in science alone, not in atomic energy, but into government. He says the government has been used to do things. One is law and order, because colonial heritage, keep everybody under control. Second is collecting revenue, which is what again the colonials did. The concept that government needs to manage, needs to develop, needs to make something bigger, better, provide employment, create wealth for everybody, create better lives for people, create happiness, was just not there. And he says, I want to see whether we from management schools who have been trained to try and do this for somebody else, for the corporate sector, to make them more efficient, you know, make them do better, make their employees happy, get people to join them. Can we transfer all these learnings that you have as part of your management course to the government and see what can be done? And I found this fascinating. And I said, well, this is very worthwhile. And I can tell you, when people from my generation would empathize with me, the young people would be a bit shocked. I thought I'd do this for 2 years, and you know, if it doesn't work, I'll throw it out. So 2 things. One is how foolish. One is thinking that you can throw it up and get another job. Second was, of course, some degree of idealism, saying you can bring change. The third is, I thought 2 years. When I talk to young people nowadays, say, I tried this job for 2 weeks. If it doesn't work, I'll give it up. So 2 years. Well, the 2 years became 25 years between atomic energy and space, but I stayed there. But I tell you this story because in the few minutes, he was able to convey the gist of what he was trying to do and enthuse, convince, and motivate somebody like me who, as I said, very genuinely, when I reflect back, went with the feeling that I'm not interested in this job here. I just want to meet Dr. Vikram Sarabhai and say, I met this man and I talked to him and I enjoyed talking to him. And he was able to convey to me the excitement of his job. And this, I will come back to one more story that tells you the story. That was the start. From there, I want to touch a little bit on something else which tells you about the space program, and Vikram Sarabhai, and Tapan mentioned that, what was called the satellite instructional television experiment. Now, Dr. Sarabhai had this dream, saying, see, he was very focused. In those days, remember, India was much more rural than it is today. Even today, 55%, 60% of people live in rural areas, about 45-50% depend on farming for their income. In those days, in the late 60s, it was more. And rural India was even more distressed than parts of it are today. Farmers never made money, there was smaller and smaller land, and this was days before the so-called Green Revolution. So yields were poor, it was a terrible state. If the monsoon failed, just no water, there were no big irrigation dams, no irrigation projects. groundwater was not being pumped because there was no electricity in the villages. So we really had problems. So he was focused very much on the farms. So he thought, look, one way as new developments take place in the laboratories, this was the start of what was becoming the Green Revolution, with work going on abroad, particularly in the Philippines, on new varieties of wheat and rice that were being developed that could increase yields by 20-30% and bring down costs for farmers. And he said, how do we get all these new things that are happening in labs elsewhere in the world, happening in our own labs? Some of you are from there, I know, from the IRI, other parts of ICAR. How can we get these things from the laboratory to farmers when there's no communication? The farmer can't read. Days of high illiteracy. And how do you convey something to the farmer? Radio's reach is limited. How much can you talk on radio? Nothing else was there. Maybe some posters, but how much can you convey in one poster? And then he said television is a great means because it is audiovisual. You can show what you want to do. You can talk about it and you don't need literacy. But how do you get television to remote rural areas? The only TV station in those days was in Delhi. The reach was about 30 kilometers outside Delhi. So, maybe 80, 100 villages covered, not more than that. That's about all. No television anywhere else. To extend television in those days, you had to go step by step. So you put a repeater and take the signal further and then take the signal further. Or you put a microwave link, which is expensive and will take time, and take the signal out. It will take decades to get out into the real remote areas and get television there. And that is when he felt satellite technology. What can we do? And coincidentally, at that time, the US was developing this large satellites that deploy with antennas, which means you could go into space and unfold an antenna. Just like you open an umbrella, you open out the antenna. And because it was very large, you could focus in a small, powerful signal, and you could pick it up on a small dish. What today, we were developing the technology for technology. Vikram Sarabhai saw this and said, hey, you don't know what to do with the technology you're developing. I know what to do with it, I know how to use it. You move this satellite over India, and we will use it for its lifetime. At that time it was estimated to be 2 years, and beam programs of television into rural areas in India, and I'll set up the ground structure. You just lend me the satellite. Because NASA then suddenly popped and said, no, how can we give it to you for 2 years? So they agreed to give it to us for 1 year. And so the satellite television experiment began. We set up these small things in 2,500 villages across India. I won't elaborate on that except to tell you that where we set these up? We set these up in 6 states in the country, including North Bihar, where our teams, and Tapan was a young man then, but he may recall our days from SAC ISRO, where our teams which did the maintenance used to cross the Ganga, and I must say this only in a closed room, now it's many years, going to Nepal and come back. Because there was no other way you could get to those villages in Bihar and North Bihar, except doing that in the Ganga flood. So our maintenance teams were running places in North Bihar. We had TV sets in villages in Orissa where there was no power. So what do? We went there by intention, by choice, because Vikram Sarabhai said, we want to go to the poorest farmers in the most backward parts of the country. So you went to Orissa, everybody thought we were mad. This is television, satellite television, sophisticated equipment, never even developed, we weren't used in the country, and you're going to villages which you can't even reach after 8 hours where there's no power. What are you going to do? He said, no, we run these on batteries. So we ran these TV sets, and these are, I don't know how many of you at the back even know of that, younger people, tube sets, high power consumption. They're not solid state, solid state sets then. No electronics, you had tubes, electron tubes with 5 sets. So ran them on batteries in parts of Orissa, where we had, set up 400 of these in schools, and same 400 in Bihar, and then we had, for contrast, and to get a good proper experiment. Remember? Science. We were all with that, and Vikram Sarabhai more than anybody else. This was a scientific experiment to see what happened. So you wanted diversity. So find backward places in Bihar and Orissa, but then you wanted a different terrain, different concept. Can we maintain these sets? So Rajasthan, desert. Unlike wet Bihar, Rajasthan. And then these were all north and east, so we went south, Karnataka, Andhra. These were where we set up 400 sets each, roughly, so about 2,500 TV sets, beaming programs of farming, of development, and importantly, schools, because that was the other bug in the bonnet of many of us, including Vikram Sarabhai, saying the future is science. And the future of science is young people. They must get enthused. They must feel science is something interesting, and they must learn science well. How can they do it if they have nothing, no teacher, no books, no equipment?
So how can you use television as a tool, not to replace these, many of these are irreplaceable, but at least to get 80% of the way and let the brighter children feel enthused enough to go and look for themselves. So television programs on science taken to primary school children, using the best teachers we could find, using all the techniques of television that we could then find. You know, a little bit of slow motion, a little bit of animation. Very rudimentary in those days, too expensive, we couldn't afford too much money. But we did some of that because that is the way you can create even something that is even more than the textbook. These people may not have textbooks in the schools, in the rural areas, but in some way, there's something that is better than a textbook. Because in the textbook, you can't animate, you can't slow motion, you can't zoom in and show something in greater detail, something you saw on the slides here, as you began to see those pictures now of what? Not things in the textbook, but of the moon. And we couldn't show them the moon in those days, but we did a lot more to show them the best teachers, experiments. And again, great care, and I mentioned this in passing, but just as a short-term concept, which we picked up. Again, in discussions from him, by then, unfortunately, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai had passed away when we started producing the programs, but based on our understanding of our concepts. And I always give one of my favorite examples. It's much hackneyed, but we actually saw this. Many of you have done some amount of engineering or even physics would know that the standard way of describing component failure is what is called infant mortality. So you have standard curve, the high mortality, then a long period of stability, and end of life, high mortality again. So this curve, if I draw it like this, is called, typically in most textbooks which come from abroad, and therefore many of our textbooks, the bathtub curve. Now, many people in these universities, maybe even schools, in most urban areas, would get a concept of bathtub curve. But imagine going and telling a village child, bathtub curve. What is a bathtub? Ever seen a bathtub in your life? Even I didn't see a bathtub for a long time, but I had some concept from pictures or movies or something else. These children don't know. So we made sure the programs, especially for children, had concepts and things which are related to their day-to-day life. So if you were teaching air pressure, we give the example of a bicycle, which you can use for a million different scientific things. If you were teaching flotation, you showed the vessel, which is heavy, carried typically, unfortunately, by the mother, or never the father, to the village pond to fill water, and then it floats. And she fills it with water and starts sinking. Just simple examples like that, which they see, so they relate to. And that's how science was brought to life. Very exciting, great fun, enjoyed doing it. And I tell you all this story because all this relates to down-to-earth ways of using what? The most sophisticated scientific technology, space technology that then existed. Because this satellite had only one contemporary, which was the US defense satellite, which also had a smaller deployable antenna. And I told you about the antenna, very interesting, just a sideline, tangential. It was a small rocket. How do you fit a 30-foot diameter antenna in that? That's what you needed, a 30-foot diameter antenna. So what do? You think and think. And then you take an analogy from somewhere else. I already gave you the analogy. I ask this question to young people normally, and many get stumped hardly if you think of it. The most routine daily example. When you're going in the rain, you think it might rain, you carry an umbrella. You don't open it, you keep it folded. When it starts raining, you open it. So it stays folded, goes into space. When it's up there, you open it out. Now it's standard. And my friends in space agencies around the world and ISRO have mastered this technique of deploying. But in those days, this was state of the art. It was the latest technology. So use the latest technology of a communication satellite with high power, with a large deployable antenna, beaming programs into rural India, where for the first time you set up small dishes. In those days, we had to use 10-foot diameter dishes, along with a preamp and a wrapper, a low noise amplifier, feeding into a TV set. And all this worked well. Experiment was lovely, the one-year experiment. But this experiment, and I go back again to the concept of science and Vikram Sarabhai's thinking, this experiment was not just to show something or to do an experiment. The idea was, this is something India needs. But India needs it across the country. We need our own system, we need our own satellite. We need to have not 2,500, but 250,000 receivers like this. How do you do that? How much does it cost? How do we know it will work? Because as a scientist, the first thing you want to do is not go by your own faith and conviction. You ask questions. And I think for young people this is very important. Answering questions is great. That's what you learn to do, that's what your textbook tells you, that's what your exams do. But questioning the answers is equally important. If the answer is a satellite system for India, question that. How do I know it will work? Somebody must ask that question. And that is science. How do I know it will work? Do a lab experiment. In this case, take it out in the field. Do an experiment of 1 year. Minimize your cost. Borrow somebody else's satellite. Don't pay them for it. That he was very good at. He said, give to me free. The Americans did think of charging satellite. They didn't know what to do also. NASA, after all, also is not a company. We are not a company. So we got the satellite for free. Invest in the ground segment, not too much. I remember writing papers then because government, again, good question. I mean, you may think it's bureaucratic, but it's a very good question. Somebody in government asked this question. Great experiment. Suppose it fails. Suppose something goes wrong. What is the cost? So we spent a lot of time preparing a paper called The Infructuous Cost of Site. And got it through interministerial discussions and presented today, of course, there was the PMO because the PM is Minister for Space, as you know. But that's a different story. But that's the question. So therefore the experiment. And guess what? Let me step one step backward before this. Even before SITE was supposed to start in 73. There was a delay on the US side. Some more delays. Then they moved it after a year. So it started in 75. Dr. Vikram Sarabhai passed away in late 71, but all the planning had begun for SITE. But even before SITE, he asked himself the question. This nobody else asked. Saying, all of us sit and discuss and we think that TV, it's so obvious, it's audio-visual, it has pictures, it's a powerful medium. People will learn and absorb from that. But how do we know? What is the proof? So what did he do? In 1968, and that's when I joined, soon after my onions and potatoes, I was sent to more farmer stuff. Saying, hey, we now want to do an experiment in the only TV station in the country, which is Delhi, to broadcast programs for farmers. Till then, they had done some school programs, they had done all the university programs, and of course, entertainment. Said we want to make programs for farmers and do a proper, independent, controlled scientific study to see do they gain knowledge out of the TV programs. So we set up a study, control group, experimental group, no TV exposure, done by not us, independent third party did the evaluation. 1 year experiment then continued on and on called Krishi Darshan. So my friends in Delhi, and many friends there from college days, from IIM days, hated, because Krishi Darshan was the most hated program, because they had only 3 hours of television in the evening, and now that half an hour is gone, and hey, you're showing us farmers, cows and buffaloes, what do we do? But I thought it was very important. Again, how do you make sure that the right farmers of different categories see it? So, not dependent on private sets, TV sets were set up, financed by ISRO in Panchayat Ghars, community centers, in 80 villages in Delhi. So, all farmers could come and see it there, and we broadcast programs and evaluation. So, first step, starting in 68, prove that television is effective. Next step, satellite television, with all its complications and maintenance and so on goes. Third step, INSAT system, operational, invested in, working. So real method of science, you might say, concept, experiment, proof, validate, test, check, correct, and then go further. No jumping ahead, no convictions, no self-righteousness. I know this is the way to go. You may be the best person, you may be the most intellectual person, you may be the most intelligent person, but answers come from evidence and from data. And I think that's something which stuck in my mind. And then all this evidence and data for what? To look at what you can do to improve the life of the poor people, the farmer, the rural child, and to see what you can do to promote science and the methods of science in this country. I think that was all part of what he was able to do. My great happiness is that, I tell you all these stories from the 60s and 70s, continuing then into the 80s, is because this ethos has, to me as I see it, and I hope I'm right, has crept into the DNA of ISRO on a permanent basis. The concept that what we do in technology is meant for the good of people. I hope it's there, I hope it's strong, I hope it survives. But I think it's there. Many people do it. Tapan mentioned DECO towards the end, that's Development and Educational Communication Unit, set up many years after Dr. Vikram Sarabhai passed away. But the seed of that was planted when he was there. We had set up somewhat similar groups called by different names then, in atomic energy, then in space, And then in almost all the scientific departments, going by different names, some were called planning and analysis group, some were called program analysis group, and they had their own, specializations, directions, and movements. But the original concept was something that was very enduring, which we took forward in DECU. And we were, I think, are even today, the only space organization in the world that has dozens and dozens. At the peak, I had 150 people working with me, non-scientists, all social scientists, from anthropology to sociology to psychology, to do what? To find out first, what are the needs of the people? Particularly people we don't understand. And most of us in those days, now there's greater diversity, were from urban areas, from urban schools and colleges. Few were from smaller towns, but not too many. And I think this understanding of what people really want, what do they understand, what is their attention span, what is the idiom in which you communicate? Yes, if you're speaking to somebody in Tamil Nadu, obviously to a farmer you speak in Tamil, but what idiom? What is the difficulty of words you use? What examples you give? This all came from the social science group, who then tested the TV programs. But that was not it. That was a very limited concept for the TV experiment. The concept was much broader. If you look at it, I want you to think visually. By intention, I have no slides. One part of it, which many technology organizations do, every technology organization does, is what's technologically feasible and how much can we push those boundaries. If something can be done by technology, what can we do more? So there's a technological feasibility angle to whatever project you undertake, and you try and push that as much as you can. Then in more recent years, as budgets have tightened, or as budgets of technology organizations have grown bigger and bigger, it's no longer saying, I'll give you a little money, go do what technology you want. Budgets have grown very big now. So government's asking the question, what is the return? So there's a smaller part, much smaller, that looks at economic, you might say economic viability. These are mostly government-funded organizations, so they're not looking at what a private sector will do as what is the profitability, but what is the economic viability? If I invest so much money, is there some possibility that there is some kind of return to society, to the country, now, 10 years from now? Is there something there? So most countries now, when they take up large projects, barring a few blue skies projects, look at what you might consider as the intersection of these two sets. What is technologically feasible and what is economically viable? So one group of technologists continues to do technology, one group looks at economics, and the intersection of these two sets is where you get large projects happening. We introduced a third concept, which was, you might call, social desirability. That was the first thought, but we adapted that to say, how do you make it socially desirable? That is, how can we benefit society? It's not just economic viability. Society in our case is those who are not so well off. Those who don't have jobs, those who are not well educated. What can you do for them? So how do you turn the technology and mold it into something that's socially desirable? And one example is what I just narrated to you on the satellite TV. You could use DTH, as much of it is today, for entertainment. Technologically feasible, economically viable. Good for everybody. But is it socially desirable? In many ways, yes, everybody wants entertainment. But how can you make it more desirable? Can you add education? Can you add some development programs? Can you bring in something more to that? I think that part is what we're looking at in ISRO. And the intersection of all three sets, that sweet spot in the middle, where you have technological feasibility, economic viability, and social desirability is what we're trying to look at. And that's part of what this group of social scientists, MBAs, economists that we created in ISRO was supposed to do. And in many ways, as somebody said later, and this was what one sentence which Dr. Sarabhai told me long ago when we were beginning to build the genesis, the nucleus of this group was, I want you folks to be the conscience of the organization. So organizations that have a conscience, they don't just do things because it's exciting, which many things are. They don't just do it because somebody has said do it. They don't just do it because somebody else did it 5 years ago. They do it because conscience says, yes, this is a good thing. And I think this again is a part of the humanism and what you do for something that is good. Now this does not exclude, let me be very clear because sometimes this gets misunderstood. This does not exclude, science, blue skies projects. In fact, in Vikram Sarabhai's days, as you know, he was a researcher and doing a lot of work himself on things like cosmic rays. And you may say, now, what is the application of this for the people? But understand, as he did, that science is something that does have a return. Science in the long run is crucial for the country, and you have to develop that. How much effort, how much money, can you take some of that understanding from science and put it here? I think that is the critical part. That is not just science, it's about where you can take that and how do you interface that with something else. So it's not that scientists become development workers, they do their work, but there's some part of the organization, especially when you're a large organization, that can take what is being done in science and technology and see how I can mold that and take it into some practical use. And again, which is why now you understand I started the earlier example, there were a group of scientists working on radiation, and irradiation of everything from medical waste to everything else. He didn't ask them to go and do something else. He got me, as somebody who's not a scientist and not going to ever be able to do that kind of technology, to say, they are doing that technology. Your job is to see how can you take that and apply it somewhere else. So I think this is the difference between an organization and individuals. Individuals do what they're good at, what excites them, what they're passionate about. But an organization has to think of a larger goal. They have to think of how that part that's being done can be taken to something else. And I think that was his genius. To be able to conceive an organization where all these different parts did their own things. There were scientists who did science. There were technologists, particularly in our ISRO centers, say in Bangalore or Trivandrum, who did technology. They didn't do science, let's be very clear. They did technology, they did engineering. There were other people who did other things, and then there were a few of us whose job was to see how do you translate this into something else. That is the holistic picture of the organization, which I think he was able to do and draw and make things very exciting for people like me. And as I said, I hope that continues. One last closing thing, because, and there may be questions on that, so let me not preempt the question, I'm open to a discussion on it. Many people have asked me this, and I've been somewhat reticent to speak in public as in media about it. What about missions which are getting bigger and bigger? Just Chandrayaan, Mars, Moon. I think they're part of what I said, which is why I gave that holistic picture of what it is. They're part of what it is that we do. However, I would add a caveat, which many of you may disagree with, and I know the mood is not quite to agree with that in general, that one thing Vikram Sarabhai has stuck with me. Times have changed, nothing to me is gospel. Even what he said, as I told you earlier, is to be questioned, not taken as right at all, because he would not like that himself. But he was very clear that we don't do things for prestige. We do things because we want to do them, we do things because they're useful to us and to our people. So I am a bit wary, not at all of Chandrayaan or going to Mars or doing interplanetary missions, but I'm wary of doing this for prestige rather than for science or for technology or to see where it can be used. So it's great if we are the second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever, but that cannot be the driver. As I told somebody, and this I don't mind saying in this gathering here, not in public, we want to be ahead of somebody else. What if that somebody else goes, buys a launch and puts somebody on the moon tomorrow? That's not technology. We know what we are doing, and we should be confident of ourselves and stay the course. We want to get to the moon because we want to get there, not because we are ahead of somebody or want to be first or because it's prestige. Yes, if we can get there before somebody else, that's nice. Because it is at the end of the world, a competitive world. But we shouldn't get caught up with that. It's not a reason to be in the race. You join a race because you want to be there. And then if you join the race, you want to win. But your choice is to join that particular race. And for years and years, and I would think even today, especially in remote sensing, we are amongst the leaders, I would hesitate to say number one, in use of remote sensing for practical problems. There are other countries that do far better than us. Their resolutions are better, the spectral resolution is better, they have more satellites than we have. But in terms of applying that remote sensing, the real problems of what people face, I would yet think we are among the top leaders. And I think that's the kind of thing we are going to sustain and continue. That's it. Let me stop here. I can go on, but thank you very much for your time. I think there's time for questions. Samir or yes, I know we're running out of time, but if you have time, I'm happy enough to take a few questions.
Maybe we can take.
Taken back to the era of 74, 75, when I used to see your team working. The question which I was discussing with you before lunch, I want to be answered to the larger audience, and that is, you demonstrated 40 years back, more than that space tools can be used to take the education to the farthest part of the country. What is the situation today? When a lot of young kids from rural areas, distressed parents, barely they are able to manage finances, but they are in a distressed condition, they cannot educate their kids by sending to the coaching classes in places like Kota and all that. Now in this factual position, vis-a-vis site, what you would like to say?
Yeah, thank you, Pariyar. I think this is a difficult question to give a direct answer to. You can always look at it as half full and half empty, which is a way of evading the question, frankly. Saying what is being done, there's open education, TV is being done and so on. But very frankly, I share your angst in that. Because, we could have done so much more because it's our need. And, I think the kind of promise that was born in the early days, not just of SITE, but many other work that is being done in this area, has not quite fulfilled. And I'm more pained because it's not just from SITE and television. I've seen this even in the computer. I've had many years of linkage with the IT industry now. Even here and now with new interactive learning, the tools that are there with anytime, anywhere, any device, interact with anybody's possibilities. You're seeing things like MOOCs, massive online courses coming from elsewhere in the world. Many of our people are using them, which is excellent. But we should have been the pioneers and taken this out in a massive way to the country. No. I mean, as I said, there are examples. So I know there'll be always somebody who said, but I saw this in there, and it's true. But given the massive size of our problem, one would have hoped for really an equally massive response using technology, and that has not quite happened. So people like me who, get impatient very soon because the amount of time I have, I don't need the headroom, as you might say, is limited. So we are impatient. But I think that impatience may have some justification saying maybe things should have moved faster.
Sir, can it be done that Sarabhai as a scientist was able to then convince the government that this is needed? But the current generation of these scientists have failed to convince the government that the vaccines still need to be used for education.
Well, one way of looking at it, but I understand what you're saying. But I'm not trying to, again, I'm not trying to evade what you're saying. But when you want to do something on a very large scale, you need champions that are beyond science and technology. You need political champions. And the political will, as we all know, irrespective of party or government or who's there or state or center, the thrust on things like education or health also is minimal. Look at our health situation. We are below places in southern Africa on this. People with per capita income, not GDP, per capita incomes which are half ours are doing as good. Look at our neighbors. Their health indicators in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, Nepal are ahead of us. Why? Because there's no political will. The technology exists, technological capability exists. Anyway, that's the answer. I don't know why it happens, I have no answer, but that's a fact.
Such explain knowledge and your experience. Sir, I wanted to know your general knowledge about, general thought about what do you think about the general environmental degradation, poverty, and such kind of things, unemployment, and the sustainability. Are we moving in the right direction as of now?
I think something for a chat over coffee or a drink. Well, I said that things are moving in the right direction, it's difficult to say. The whole world is moving in a certain direction, which is there. But I think these are very serious issues, and we are directly affected by them. It's not something somewhere. Look at Delhi. I live in Delhi. And we are living literally in a gas chamber. Literally. And it's not just Delhi, it's called Delhi. It's the whole northern belt in India. The whole northern belt is right from Amritsar on in our country, right up to Patna and now going to Calcutta.
It was a kind of a leapfrogging at that time, because technological leapfrog, that's what makes a difference. So at this juncture, when we are sitting and talking, the country needs what kind of leapfrog technology, so that in your view that we can have a kind of transformation which we would like to see.
Very, very good question. People do ask me this, and I say it's for younger people like you, maybe even younger than you, because some students at the back, to conceive some leapfrog. But you're right. This country has done great where we've leapfrogged. Space, where we leapfrogged atomic energy, IT, telephony. We leapfrogged the whole landline thing. We are among the leaders today in terms of lowest rates, good connectivity, very good speeds, highest downloads in the world. So I think leapfrogging is what we've got to think of. Now what that idea, what that project, what the thing is, becomes Sarabhai laid out a decade vision, a 20-year vision for a long time, which we're fulfilling now. He said, first applications, then we will do the ground segment, then we'll do the satellite, then we'll do the vehicles to launch them, and we put these all together. That has taken from his lifetime 20 years or more to do that. But that was the vision. So what is our 20-year vision now? I don't know. It's for people like you are there now to define it and do it.
One last question, please.
Good evening, sir. So as you told that you are a good person in starting off the lecture, I totally agree that the kind of experience and the kind of brilliance was there in the talk. I really appreciate that thing. And on the vice point, we feel that a lot of people here consider you as an inspiration. So I am a teacher by profession, and the kind of questions sir has asked before, that how things will go ahead. Teacher is in a lot of pressure nowadays, in academics and a lot of other works like accreditations and everything. But I am a deep believer that outreach is something, because I come from a rural background. I go to all villages and teach about space science and technologies through outreach programs and everything. And I believe that teachers are the one, because nowadays parents are finding it difficult to deal with these children because of a lot of other problems, as we all know. Teachers are the one who are the only one who can control a student at least to some extent. Saying that, on the other part I say that a genuine answer I want from you, because I feel that you have seen an extreme 360 degree of life in your experience. If you are right now at the age of 21, and the kind of example which you told that Vikram Sarabhai sir took to Orissa and Rajasthan and he implemented a seed and it extended in the future. If you are at the age of 21 right now, and if the whole audience or if the Almighty says that you have 3 ideas to seeding in the current Indian culture, which could be the 3 ideas or 3 visions which can give a future or best India in the coming future? If possible, can you? Just 3 seeds. Thank you.
Tough question. It's like being on one money got crorepati kind of thing. I need a lifeline. No. I don't know. But I think the question is one of deep thought. Let me just give 3 random answers, but I think the question is more for other young people, particularly to think about what they want to do. I would think 3 things which are very important. One is, at that age, you tend to be idealistic. Don't lose your idealism. You get cynical very fast. Cynicism can be about politics, it can be about money, it can be about everything else, it can be about relationships. But I think the sense of idealism is key. And I was very lucky, just reflecting back, that I was looking for a career and a job in days when the environment, in many ways, despite my discovery, I am somewhat probably negatively and unfairly, that was the atmosphere. But around us outside, 1968, for those of you who know history and those of you who lived to that, was a very different time. The world was in tumult. There were idealism all over. India was yet a very, very idealistic country. We were yet going through the Peruvian years of idealism and nationalism in a very positive, good sense, wanting to do something. So I would say don't lose your sense of idealism. Second, I would say do whatever you're passionate about. Because if you're passionate about something, you will do it. You must. And that passion must be there because you see failure very often. And I see young people, I do a lot of work with startups, young people who fail. And unfortunately in this country, when something fails, it's not that the idea failed, it's that the person failed. This is the difference between us and successful startup entrepreneurial ecosystems, whether it's Silicon Valley or Israel or Korea, is that in these countries, ideas fail, people don't. And if you failed twice, they say, hey, you're great, you learned from 2 failures, I'll yet invest in you. India, you failed once, they say, this guy's a failure. So I think that concept of keeping up with your passion in difficult times is very important. And if you're passionate, as I said, you'll do it, irrespective of what field you're in. If you want to be a chef or a cricketer or a scientist, if you're passionate, you'll work hard at it and do it. And that's where we see so many examples, and you're exemplifying one yourself, of people who come from very difficult, smaller towns, who, as Mr. Pariyar just said, have difficult, they don't go to coaching classes, and yet make their way up in other areas. So I think passion is very important. That's something. And the third is, of course, a very obvious one, but yet I say it because sometimes the temptation is high today. Values and integrity. No cost can you sacrifice them. There's sometimes shortcuts, quick gain, something easy. Never do that. It doesn't, first of all, it doesn't pay off in the long term. So it's even pragmatically self-defeating. But just from a point of view of being a good human being, it's not something.
And popularization of space technology for the past. It seems only appropriate that Sir be the one to develop the Dr. Vikram Sarabhai Memorial Lecture. I thank you very much, Sir, for your personal anecdotes, which I'm sure have inspired us all. I request